Seattle was glowing that evening. The sky brushed with warm orange and purple shades as the sun slipped behind the tall glass buildings. The air carried a light breeze, and the streets shimmered after a short drizzle. Emily Parker, a 29-year-old gallery assistant, walked quickly down Pine Street, holding her coat close. Her day had been long, the kind that drained her yet left her feeling quietly proud. She loved art, but lately, life had become a routine. Open the gallery, smile at visitors, close the doors, and go home to her small apartment. Everything felt safe but colorless, like a painting left unfinished. She turned toward her favorite cafe, a cozy corner shop with warm lights and the smell of roasted coffee beans spilling into the street. Just 5 minutes, she told herself. A small coffee before heading home was her daily treat. A moment of peace before the night began. Inside, the cafe buzzed softly with life. A couple whispered at a corner table. An older man read the newspaper. And by the large window sat a man with a sketchbook. His hair was dark, slightly messy, and his focus deep. Something about him caught Emily's attention. Not in a romantic way at first, but in the way you notice an artist completely lost in their world. She ordered her drink and moved toward the window seat next to him. As she reached for her cup, her elbow brushed against the edge of his table, and a few drops of coffee splashed onto his sketch pad. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," she said, quickly grabbing a napkin. The man looked up, surprised, then smiled. Not annoyed, but amused. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm. "It adds character to the page." Emily laughed softly, embarrassed. "Still, I ruined your work." He shook his head. "You didn't, I was just doodling." He tore off the page with the stain and pushed it aside. "I'm Daniel." "Emily," she replied, smiling back. And just like that, a conversation began. They started with small talk about art, the weather, how the city looked more beautiful after it rained. But soon their words moved deeper. Daniel was a travel photographer who had recently returned from Italy after 3 years of working abroad. He told her about chasing sunsets across the Amalfi Coast and capturing the way morning light touched old stone streets. Emily listened with quiet admiration. She had always loved hearing people talk about their passions. It reminded her of why she fell in love with art in the first place. When she asked why he came back, he said, "Home just felt like the right place to start over." There was a softness in his tone, a hint of something unspoken, and Emily didn't press for details. Instead, she shared stories of the gallery, how she'd grown up painting, and how she still dreamed of creating her own exhibit one day. Time slipped away unnoticed. The cafe slowly emptied as night deepened outside. Streetlights flickered on, and soft music played in the background. For the first time in months, Emily forgot to check her phone, forgot about the deadlines waiting at work. She was simply there. In the moment, Daniel showed her his sketchbook. It wasn't filled with perfect drawings, but quick outlines of places and people, fragments of life caught between travels. "You see this one?" He pointed to a rough sketch of a street musician. He played the same song every day for tourists, but every note sounded new. Emily smiled. Maybe he just really loved what he did. "Exactly," Daniel said. "That's the kind of love I want for my work, where it never feels old." Something in his words stayed with her. She looked at him, noticing how his eyes seemed to hold stories, the kind that aren't told but felt. He wasn't like anyone she had met before. There was calm confidence in him, the kind that comes from knowing loss, travel, and starting again. When she finally looked at her watch, 2 hours had passed. "Oh no, I didn't realize it was so late," she said. Gathering her things, Daniel smiled. "Time moves differently when you're having a real conversation." She nodded, a bit shy now. "I should go. My apartment's a few blocks away." He stood up too, polite and warm. "Let me walk you out." Outside, the night air felt cool, almost refreshing. They stood for a moment on the sidewalk, the city lights reflecting in the puddles around them. "It was really nice talking to you, Emily," Daniel said. "You too," she replied. "I'm glad I spilled coffee on your sketchbook." He laughed softly. "Me too." They said goodbye, no promises, no exchanged numbers, just a quiet sense that something gentle had begun. As Emily walked home, she couldn't stop smiling. The streets looked more alive than usual, the air lighter. For once, she didn't think about work or her lonely apartment. She thought about the warmth in his eyes, the way his words made her heart feel awake again. When she reached home, she poured herself another cup of coffee and stood by the window. The city below shimmered, alive with movement, yet she felt perfectly still, content, peaceful. It was strange. She thought, how one small accident could change everything. One spilled coffee, one shared laugh, and suddenly, life didn't feel so predictable anymore. She didn't know if she would see him again, but for that night, it didn't matter. What mattered was how she felt. Light, curious, quietly hopeful. And as she turned off the lights and lay in bed, she whispered to herself, maybe something good is finally starting. Outside, the rain began again. Gentle and rhythmic, like a soft beginning, written by fate. The days after that evening felt different for Emily. The city looked brighter, the mornings lighter, and even her small apartment felt warmer. She didn't know why she kept thinking about Daniel, the man with the quiet smile and the calm voice. She told herself it was nothing serious, just a pleasant memory. But when he walked into the gallery 3 days later, holding 2 cups of coffee, her heart skipped in surprise. "I thought I'd make up for the one you spilled," he said, smiling. Emily laughed. "So this is my replacement coffee. Consider it a peace offering," he replied. That small gesture turned into something more. Daniel began visiting the gallery often. Sometimes he came to see a new exhibition. Other times he just sat quietly while Emily worked, sketching or editing photos on his laptop. They talked between visitors, about colors, light, music, books, and dreams they hadn't told anyone else about. Emily found herself waiting for his visits, her days brighter whenever he appeared. One Sunday, Daniel invited her to a photography exhibit downtown. She almost said no. She had laundry to do, errands to finish. But something inside her whispered go. They spent hours walking through the gallery, standing side by side in silence, letting the images speak. When they left, it started to rain, light and playful. Instead of running for cover, Daniel lifted his camera. "You look beautiful in this light," he said, his tone sincere, not flirtatious. Emily blushed, tucking her hair behind her ear. "I probably look like a wet mess." "Maybe," he smiled, "but a beautiful one." She laughed, shaking her head, but deep down, his words stayed with her. After that day, their friendship deepened. They began exploring small corners of the city, the old bookstore near the pier, the Saturday farmers market, the hidden cafe that served the best blueberry muffins in town. Daniel always carried his camera. Emily carried a sketch pad. They never labeled what they were. Friends, maybe something more, but their connection felt effortless, unspoken. Sometimes, when they sat by the lake at sunset, silence said more than words. Emily would rest her head on her knees, watching the reflection of the sky ripple over the water, while Daniel took photos quietly beside her. She never asked what he planned to do with those pictures, and he never explained. It was enough that they shared the moment. As summer deepened, the city bloomed with color. Emily's gallery hosted a new art collection, and Daniel helped her prepare for it. They spent late nights arranging paintings, adjusting lights, and laughing over pizza and cold coffee. One evening, as they stood admiring their finished setup, Emily whispered, "I wish this night could last longer." Daniel looked at her, his voice gentle. "Maybe it already has. We'll remember it." His words made her chest tighten. She didn't know if it was love, but it felt close, like standing at the edge of something beautiful and not wanting to move forward because you're afraid it might end up. Their closeness didn't need decorations. They simply existed in each other's space, comfortable and free. Emily started painting again after months of creative silence. Daniel noticed. "You're different these days," he said one evening, watching her brush glide over the canvas. "I think you reminded me what it feels like to care about something again," she replied softly. He smiled, touched. "Then I'm glad I spilled that coffee." They laughed, but behind the laughter was a feeling both of them recognized. That this connection, however quiet, had changed them. Toward the end of summer, Daniel invited Emily on a weekend trip to the coast. The drive was long, the car filled with music and easy conversation. When they reached the ocean, the wind carried salt and freedom. They walked barefoot on the sand, the waves touching their feet. Daniel took her photo as she looked at the horizon, the sunset painting her face in gold. "You always chase the light," she said, watching him focus his lens. "Maybe," he replied, "but sometimes the light finds you." It was a simple moment. No promises, no plans, yet Emily felt something shift inside her. For years, she had waited for someone to make her feel seen. And now, without trying, Daniel did. That night, they sat on the beach near a bonfire, surrounded by strangers singing softly to guitar music. Daniel handed her his camera and said, "Your turn." She hesitated, then took a photo of him, the firelight dancing in his eyes, his expression calm and real. Later, as they walked back to the small inn where they were staying, Emily whispered, "Do you ever think about forever?" Daniel looked up at the stars. "I used to," he said. "Now I think about moments. Sometimes they're all we really have." Emily didn't answer, but she understood. There was something beautiful about accepting the present, about not needing forever to make something meaningful. When they returned to Seattle, nothing changed on the outside. They still met for coffee, still visited the pier, still laughed about random things. But deep inside, everything had changed. Emily felt more alive than she had in years. She found joy in small details. The sound of rain on her window, the warmth of morning light, the simple happiness of knowing someone understood her without needing words. She didn't call it love, not yet. But every time Daniel looked at her, she felt the world quiet down. Just for a moment. It was a season of moments, small, precious, fleeting, and she wanted to hold on to every one of them. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both felt the same gentle truth, that sometimes happiness doesn't come from forever. It comes from right now. Autumn crept into Seattle quietly. The air turned crisp. The trees blazed with red and gold, and the days began to shorten. Emily loved this season. It felt warm yet lonely, beautiful yet temporary. And just like the weather, something between her and Daniel started to shift. It wasn't sudden, but she could feel it. The way silence sometimes replaced their laughter, how his eyes lingered on distant thoughts. He still visited the gallery, still brought her coffee, but there was a heaviness in his smile. Emily didn't ask right away. She had learned that Daniel was a man who carried his worries quietly. But one evening, when they were closing up after a long day, she noticed him staring at one of the photographs on display. A sunset over a bridge, bright but fading. "You look like you're somewhere else," she said softly. He turned toward her, a faint sadness in his eyes. I got an offer, he said. A photography project in Europe, a full year. For a moment, the room felt still. Emily tried to smile. That's amazing, she said, though her voice trembled slightly. It's everything you wanted. Daniel nodded. Yeah, it's a dream job. But it means leaving soon. She didn't know what to say. The words tangled in her throat. She wanted to tell him not to go, to stay, to choose her. But she also knew that love wasn't about holding someone back. So instead, she forced a small smile. Then we should make the most of the time left. Daniel's expression softened. I was hoping you'd say that. From that moment on, every day felt heavier with meaning. They didn't talk about the upcoming goodbye. They just filled the days with moments worth remembering. They walked through the park as golden leaves fell around them, went for long drives without a destination, shared quiet dinners where words weren't needed. Emily memorized everything, the sound of his laugh, the warmth of his hand, the way he always took photos when she wasn't looking. One evening, they went back to the lake where they had first spent time together. The sky was a wash of pink and blue, and the air smelled like rain. Daniel brought his camera, as always, but this time he didn't take pictures. He just sat beside her, watching the ripples in the water. You're not going to capture this one? She asked. He shook his head. No. Some moments are better kept here. He tapped his chest lightly. Emily looked away, blinking back the sting in her eyes. She didn't want to ruin the moment with tears. She wanted to stay strong, to just enjoy what they had. Exactly as he had once told her. As the days passed, Daniel's departure drew closer. The thought of it followed her everywhere. In her morning coffee, in the quiet walks home, in the empty corners of the gallery. She told herself she would be fine, that this was just another chapter, but her heart didn't listen. On his last weekend in Seattle, Daniel invited her to his apartment. It was filled with photos, walls covered with faces, cities, and sunsets from around the world. In the center of the room stood a small framed picture of her, taken months ago at the coast. She hadn't known he kept it. You framed that? She asked softly. He smiled. It's one of my favorites. She traced the edge of the frame with her fingers. Why? Because you weren't posing, he said. You were just there. Real. Emily looked up, her eyes glistening. You made everything feel real. They didn't say much after that. They just sat together, listening to the rain outside. It wasn't sadness between them. It was something gentler, a quiet understanding that not everything beautiful was meant to last forever. The next morning came too fast. Daniel's flight was at sunrise. Emily went with him to the airport, even though she told herself she wouldn't. She stood by the window, watching the planes take off, her hands tucked in her coat pockets. Daniel turned to her and said, "Thank you. For all of it." She managed a small smile. For what? For reminding me how good it feels to just be in a moment. She looked at him, memorizing his face one last time. Take care of yourself, Daniel. I will, he said. And you keep painting. There was a long pause, then he leaned in and hugged her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic. It was warm, steady, full of everything they never said out loud. When they finally let go, neither could find the words goodbye. Emily stood by the glass as he walked toward the gate, camera slung over his shoulder, the back of his coat moving with each step. When he disappeared into the crowd, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. On the drive home, the city looked unfamiliar, almost too quiet. But beneath the ache in her chest, there was also peace, a strange, bittersweet calm. She had loved him in the purest way, without expectations, without demands. And though it hurt to let him go, She knew that what they shared was rare. Something real that had changed both of them. That night, as she sat alone in her apartment, the city lights flickering outside, Emily opened her sketchpad. She began to draw. The lake, the sunset, the curve of Daniel's smile. Her tears blurred the lines, but she didn't stop. She whispered to herself, "I won't forget." Outside, the wind picked up, scattering leaves across the streets. Somewhere far above the clouds, Daniel's plane carried him toward a new horizon. And back in Seattle, Emily sat surrounded by memories, knowing that even though the season was ending, the moments they shared would stay with her. Bright, untouchable, forever her own. It wasn't the end she dreamed of, but it was honest. And in that honesty, there was a kind of quiet beauty, the kind that lasts long after the people are gone. Months passed after Daniel left, and Seattle moved on, as cities always do. But for Emily, time felt slower. The days blurred together. Work, home, sleep, repeat. Yet somewhere in between, she found herself thinking of him. Not with pain anymore, but with a quiet fondness. His presence had changed her. Even in absence, it lingered like a soft echo. The gallery grew busier that winter. Emily's manager noticed her new energy, how she talked more passionately with visitors, how she smiled without forcing it. It wasn't that life had become easier. It was that Emily had learned to see beauty again, even in small things. The lessons Daniel left behind, to live in moments, to find joy in light, to notice, stayed with her. One evening, as she closed the gallery, the city lights sparkled through the rain-streaked windows. She looked outside and remembered how Daniel once said, "Seattle looks best when it's wet." She smiled at the thought, realizing he was right. The city glowed, alive and breathing. A few days later, she received a postcard. It came from Florence, Italy. On the front was a photograph of a sunset over the Arno River. The sky golden, the water calm. On the back, written in Daniel's familiar handwriting, were just a few words. "Still chasing light. Hope you're painting again." Emily held the card against her chest and laughed softly through tears. It wasn't a love letter, not really. It was something more precious, a small piece of the connection they shared, still alive despite the distance. Encouraged, she started painting again seriously. Every night, after closing the gallery, she would set up her easel near the window, letting the city's hum fill her apartment. Her paintings became more expressive, full of emotion, warmth, and movement. Each one captured not Daniel himself, but the feeling he had brought into her life. In spring, the gallery owner noticed her new works and asked to display them in an upcoming local exhibit. It was her first real opportunity as an artist. Emily hesitated at first, nervous, unsure, but then remembered Daniel's words. Sometimes you just have to start. So she said yes. The evening of the exhibit arrived with soft rain and soft nerves. The gallery buzzed with conversation, the air scented with coffee and flowers. People admired her paintings, the soft colors, the dreamy skies, the human warmth that seemed to glow from every canvas. Emily moved quietly among them, grateful but overwhelmed. When someone asked what inspired her art, she answered truthfully, "Moments. The kind that don't last but change you forever." As the night went on, she noticed one of her paintings catching the most attention, a piece titled, "The Day We Didn't Say Goodbye." It showed two figures sitting by a lake under a fading sky. The light on the water looked alive. It wasn't dramatic or sad, just peaceful. By the end of the night, the painting sold. The buyer left a simple note at the counter. "Your art feels like memory." When Emily read it, her heart swelled. That was exactly what she wanted, to make people feel. Life began to move forward naturally. Emily started traveling a little, visiting art shows, meeting new people. She wasn't searching for love or closure. She was simply living fully, presently. Every city she visited, she carried a small camera with her, taking pictures the way Daniel once did. Sometimes she laughed at how much she had unknowingly become like him, chasing light, chasing stories. Years passed quietly. Seasons turned, faces changed, but the memory of that one summer stayed bright. She never tried to forget. She didn't need to. Some memories were meant to stay. One evening, while walking through downtown Seattle, Emily passed the old cafe, the one where she had spilled coffee on a stranger's sketchbook years ago. It looked almost the same. Warm lights, soft chatter, the smell of roasted beans in the air. She smiled and went inside. The same corner table by the window was empty, and she sat there with her cup of coffee, looking out at the rain. Life had come full circle. She wasn't waiting for anyone this time, but she felt him there, in the memory, in the quiet warmth of the place. She took out her sketch pad, something she hadn't done in months, and began to draw. Not a person, not a place, just light. The way it reflected off glass, the way it danced through the drops on the window. It was simple, yet perfect. As she finished, she whispered to herself, "I just enjoyed the moments. And it was the best ever in my life." There was no sadness in her voice, only peace, because she finally understood what Daniel had meant. The beauty of life wasn't about holding on to people or promises. It was about appreciating the moments that make your heart feel alive. When she left the cafe, the city lights shimmered in the puddles, and her reflection looked different, older, wiser, but content. She walked home slowly, not rushing, feeling grateful for everything, the love that came and went, the lessons that stayed, and the person she had become because of it. Later that night, as she placed Daniel's old postcard on her shelf, beside one of her framed paintings, she realized she didn't miss him with sadness anymore. She missed him with gratitude, for teaching her how to see beauty, how to live fully, and how to let go gracefully. She turned off the lights, opened the window, and let the cool night breeze drift in. Somewhere out there, maybe Daniel was still chasing sunsets, still searching for light. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew he had left a part of that light behind with her. It wasn't a love story that ended in forever. It was a love story that ended in peace, quiet, lasting, and real. And for Emily Parker, that was enough.